The stagecoach lurched to a stop in the middle of nowhere, and Zelda Crawford knew instantly that something was terribly wrong. She pressed her face against the frosted window, her breath creating small clouds in the frigid air. February 1878 had brought one of the worst winters Arizona Territory had ever seen, and now the sky looked like slate, heavy with the promise of more snow. The driver's muffled voice carried through the wooden walls of the coach, speaking urgently to someone outside. Zelda pulled her woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders and waited, heart hammering. The door swung open, letting in a blast of icy wind that stole her breath. The driver, old Sam Headley, peered in with apologetic eyes. "Miss Crawford, I am afraid we have a situation," he said, snow already gathering on his weathered face. "Lead horse threw a shoe about a mile back, been limping since. Cannot make it to Apache Junction in this weather. Storm is coming in fast, maybe 30 minutes before we are caught in the worst of it." "What do we do?" Zelda asked, trying to keep the fear from her voice. She was 22 years old, traveling alone to meet her aunt in Apache Junction after her father's death 3 months prior. Everything she owned was packed in the trunk strapped to the top of the coach. "There is a ranch about 2 miles north of here. Belongs to a young fellow named Kieran Kane. Good man, quiet type, keeps to himself mostly, but he will take us in until the storm passes. Has to. It is the code out here." Zelda nodded. She had no choice but to trust him. The alternative was freezing to death in a stranded stagecoach in the middle of the Arizona wilderness. Sam helped her down from the coach, and immediately the wind hit her like a physical force. She stumbled, but the driver caught her arm. The world around them was already beginning to disappear in swirls of white. The mountains in the distance had vanished completely, and the scrub brush nearby looked like ghostly figures emerging from fog. "Can you walk, miss? We need to move quickly." "Yes," Zelda said, though her legs were stiff from hours of sitting. "What about the horses? I will lead them. You stay close to me, you hear? Do not let me out of your sight for even a moment." They started walking, Sam leading the team of horses while Zelda trudged beside him, her skirts already heavy with snow. The wind howled like something alive and angry, pushing against them with such force that she had to lean into it just to keep moving forward. Within minutes, her face was numb, her fingers aching despite her gloves. "How much farther?" she called out, but the wind tore her words away. Sam kept moving forward with the determination of someone who knew that stopping meant death. Zelda followed, watching his dark coat, using it as her anchor in the whiteout that was rapidly consuming everything. Her feet were blocks of ice in her boots. She could no longer feel her nose or her ears. The cold was so intense it burned, seeping through every layer of clothing until it felt like it was touching her bones. She lost track of time. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. The world had become nothing but white and wind and cold. She stumbled over something, a rock or a piece of wood buried in the snow, and went down hard on her knees. Sam turned back, reaching for her, his mouth moving but no sound reaching her ears through the storm. He pulled her up and they kept moving. Zelda's mind began to wander. She thought of her father, buried now in the cold ground back in Missouri. She thought of her mother, who had died when Zelda was just a child. She thought of how strange it was that she might join them both so soon, that this frozen wasteland might be the last thing she ever saw. Then, through the white curtain of snow, a dark shape emerged, a building. No, 2 buildings, a house and a barn, both sturdy and solid against the storm. "There," Sam shouted, and the word reached her this time. They stumbled forward, the horses sensing shelter and moving faster despite their exhaustion. They reached the barn first, and Sam pounded on the door. No response. He tried the handle and it opened, revealing blessed darkness and the smell of hay and animals. "Get inside," Sam ordered. "I will see to the horses and then find the owner." Zelda stumbled into the barn, and immediately the absence of wind felt like a warm embrace, though it was barely warmer inside than out. She could see 3 horses in stalls, their eyes large and curious as they watched the newcomers. There was a cow as well, and some chickens roosting in the rafters. Sam led the stagecoach horses inside and began unhitching them with practiced efficiency. "Go to the house, Miss Crawford. Knock loud. Tell Mr. Kane what happened. He will help." Zelda nodded and turned back to the door, steeling herself for the blast of cold. She pushed outside and immediately the wind tried to knock her down. The house was only about 30 feet from the barn, but it looked like miles. She put her head down and pushed forward, one step at a time. She reached the porch and nearly collapsed against the door, pounding with both fists. "Hello, please, we need help." No response. She pounded again, harder this time, panic rising in her chest. What if no one was home? What if they had come all this way only to freeze on someone's doorstep? "Please," she screamed, hitting the door with the side of her fist. The door swung open so suddenly she nearly fell inside. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore a simple work shirt and denim pants, his feet bare despite the cold. He stared at her for a moment, surprise clear on his face. "Help us," Zelda gasped. "The stagecoach, the storm, please." "Where is your driver?" His voice was deep, calm despite the urgency of the situation. "The barn." "The horses." He nodded once, then reached for a coat hanging by the door and a pair of boots. He pulled them on quickly, efficiently, then grabbed a lantern from a hook. "Get inside. Warm yourself by the fire. I will bring your driver." Then he was gone, disappearing into the white storm as if it was nothing more than morning mist. Zelda stumbled fully inside and pushed the door closed against the wind. The house was small but well built, just 2 rooms from what she could see. The main room held a fireplace with a good fire burning, a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair, and a small kitchen area. Through an open door she could see a bedroom with a simple bed and a chest of drawers. She moved to the fire, holding her hands out toward the flames. The warmth was painful as it met her frozen skin, but she welcomed it. Slowly, gradually, feeling began to return to her fingers and toes. She pulled off her wet gloves and held her bare hands closer to the heat. The door opened again, letting in a blast of wind and snow and 2 men. Sam looked even older and more weathered than before, his face red from the cold. The other man, the one who had opened the door, set down the lantern and immediately began helping Sam out of his snow-covered coat. "You are a lucky man," the tall man said to Sam. "Another hour out there and you would have been frozen solid." "I know it, Mr. Kane. I surely do. Thank you for the shelter." So this was Kieran Kane, Zelda thought, watching him move around his small house with quiet efficiency. He was younger than she had expected, probably not more than 26 or 27. His face was weathered from outdoor work, but handsome in a rough way, with a strong jaw and a straight nose. His hands were large and calloused, the hands of a man who worked hard for his living. "Miss Crawford," Sam said, moving toward the fire. "This is Kieran Kane. Mr. Kane, this is Miss Zelda Crawford. She was traveling to Apache Junction to stay with her aunt." Kieran nodded to her, his gray eyes meeting hers for a brief moment before sliding away. "You are welcome here until the storm passes. It looks bad out there. Could last through the night, maybe into tomorrow." "Thank you," Zelda said, her voice still shaky from the cold. "We would have died without your help." "No need for thanks. It is what anyone would do." He moved to the kitchen area and pulled out a pot. "I will make coffee. You both need something hot." He worked in silence, and Zelda found herself watching him. There was something different about him, something she could not quite name. He moved carefully, deliberately, as if he was always aware of exactly where everything was. He did not look at them as he worked, keeping his eyes down or fixed on whatever task was in front of him. "How are the horses?" Sam asked. "Cold, but they will survive. I gave them hay and water." "Your team is in good shape considering what they went through." "That is a relief." Miss Crawford's belongings are still strapped to the coach outside the barn. Kieran nodded. "They will keep until morning. Nothing to be done about it now." He brought them coffee in tin cups, the liquid hot and strong and perfect. Zelda wrapped her hands around the cup and sipped gratefully, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. "I am sorry for the inconvenience," she said softly. Kieran glanced at her, then away. "You cannot control the weather. Still, we have invaded your home. It is not much of a home, but you are welcome to it." He moved back to the kitchen and began pulling out supplies. "I will make dinner. You must be hungry." They were, though Zelda had not realized it until he mentioned it. She could not remember the last time she had eaten. Breakfast, maybe, before they left the last way station. She watched as Kieran prepared a simple meal of beans and salt pork with cornbread. He worked with the same quiet efficiency he showed in everything else, his movements precise and economical. Sam dozed in the rocking chair, exhausted from their ordeal. The fire crackled and popped, and outside the wind howled, but inside it was warm and safe. "You live here alone?" Zelda asked, more to break the silence than because she needed to know. "Yes." "That must be lonely." Kieran shrugged, stirring the pot. "I prefer it." "Do you have family nearby?" "No." His tone made it clear he did not want to discuss it further. Zelda fell silent, sipping her coffee and watching the fire. She felt strange being here in this man's home, imposing on his solitude. Yet he did not seem angry about it, just uncomfortable, as if he was unused to having people around. When the food was ready, Kieran served it on simple tin plates. He woke Sam gently, and the three of them ate at the small table. It was plain fare but delicious after the cold and fear of the journey. Zelda found herself eating more than she had in weeks, the warmth and food and safety combining to wake her appetite. "This is very good," she said. "Thank you." Kieran nodded but did not respond. He ate quickly, his eyes on his plate. After dinner, Sam insisted on doing the dishes despite his exhaustion. Kieran did not argue, instead moving to check the fire and add more wood. The storm outside showed no signs of letting up. When Zelda looked out the window, she could see nothing but white pressing against the glass. "Miss Crawford will take the bed," Kieran announced. "Sam, you can have the rocking chair. I will sleep on the floor by the fire." "I cannot take your bed," Zelda protested. "That is not right. You can and you will. I am used to sleeping rough. You are not." "But no arguments." His tone was firm but not unkind. Zelda wanted to protest further, but she could see it would be useless. Besides, she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. The warmth and food and the stress of the day had caught up with her all at once. "Thank you," she said quietly. Kieran just nodded. She went into the small bedroom and closed the door. The bed was narrow but clean, with several thick quilts piled on top. She removed her wet outer clothes, hanging them on a peg on the wall, then climbed under the quilts in her chemise and petticoat. The bed smelled like pine and soap and something else, something masculine and not unpleasant. She could hear the two men talking quietly in the other room, their voices a low rumble beneath the sound of the storm. She tried to stay awake to listen, but sleep pulled her down like deep water and she surrendered to it. When Zelda woke, the room was dark and cold. She lay still for a moment, disoriented, trying to remember where she was. Then it came back to her in a rush. The storm, the ranch, the quiet man who had given her his bed. She could hear the wind still howling outside, though it sounded less violent than before. There was another sound too, closer. Breathing. Someone else in the room with her. Fear shot through her and she sat up quickly, her hand going to her throat. In the darkness she could just make out a shape on the floor near the door. Someone lying there, wrapped in what looked like a single blanket. "Mr. Kane," she whispered. The shape stirred. "Did I wake you? I apologize." "What are you doing in here?" The fire died down. "It is warmer in here." His voice was rough, as if he had been asleep. "You should take the bed. This is ridiculous." "Go back to sleep, Miss Crawford." "I will not. Not with you freezing on the floor." She threw back the covers and stood, immediately regretting it as the cold air hit her. She grabbed one of the quilts and moved to where he lay. "Here, at least take another blanket. I am fine." "You are not fine. You are being stubborn." She dropped the quilt on top of him. "Please." She could not see his face in the darkness, but she heard him sigh. "Thank you." Zelda returned to the bed and crawled back under the remaining quilts. She was shivering now, the brief exposure to the cold air having stolen all the warmth she had gathered. Her teeth chattered despite her efforts to control them. "Are you all right?" Kieran asked from the floor. "Just cold. I will be fine." Silence. Then, "I could light a lamp, build up the fire." "No, please do not go to the trouble. I will warm up soon." But she did not warm up. If anything, she grew colder. The quilts that had seemed so warm before now felt thin and inadequate. She curled into a ball, trying to conserve heat, but still she shook. "Miss Crawford." "Yes, you are going to make yourself ill. Let me build up the fire." "I am fine, truly." She heard him move, the sound of the blankets rustling. Then she heard his footsteps, bare feet on the wooden floor. A match struck, flared, and he lit a lamp on the dresser. In the soft glow she could see him clearly for the first time. His dark hair was disheveled from sleep, his shirt untucked from his pants. He looked younger in the lamplight, less guarded. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, some spark of recognition or understanding. Zelda felt her breath catch. Kieran looked away first, clearing his throat. "I will get the fire going." "Thank you." He left the room, taking the lamp with him. Zelda lay in the darkness, her heart beating faster than it should. What had just happened? Nothing, she told herself. Nothing at all. She was just cold and tired and emotional from the journey. But she could not shake the feeling that something had shifted, that something important had just occurred, even if she could not name what it was. Light grew in the main room as Kieran built up the fire. She could hear the crackle of flames, the sound of wood being added. Warmth began to seep through the walls and doorway. Gradually, her shivering subsided. Kieran did not return to the bedroom. She heard him settle in the main room, probably near the fire. She thought about calling out to him, thanking him again, but somehow the moment had passed. Instead, she closed her eyes and tried to sleep. But sleep would not come. She lay awake, listening to the storm, thinking about the strange man in the other room. Why did he lie out here alone? What was he hiding from? And why did she care so much? Morning came slowly, the darkness outside gradually giving way to a gray light. Zelda dressed in her still damp clothes, grimacing at the cold fabric against her skin. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Sam already awake, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. Kieran was at the stove making breakfast. "Good morning, Miss Crawford," Sam said cheerfully. "Storm has passed. Sky is clearing." Zelda moved to the window and looked out. He was right. The wind had died down to occasional gusts, and she could see patches of blue between the clouds. The world outside was buried in snow, everything transformed into unfamiliar shapes and shadows. "How deep is it?" she asked. "About 2 feet on the level, deeper where it drifted," Kieran said, not turning from the stove. "The road will be impassable for at least another day, maybe 2. 2 days. Zelda's heart sank. Her aunt would be worried sick when the stagecoach did not arrive as scheduled. At least. The snow needs time to settle and melt some before wagons can get through. Even then it will be rough going. Sam nodded in agreement. He is right, miss. We are stuck here for a bit. Kieran served breakfast, more of the simple fare he seemed to specialize in. Eggs from his chickens, more cornbread and coffee. They ate in relative silence, the awkwardness of strangers forced together by circumstance. After breakfast, Kieran put on his coat and boots. I need to check the animals, make sure they came through the night all right. Sam, you are welcome to come with me if you are able. I am able, Sam said, standing stiffly. Just let me get my coat. Miss Crawford, you should stay inside. It is too cold for you out there. Zelda wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She was not dressed for this kind of weather, and she had no desire to repeat yesterday's brush with freezing to death. All right, she agreed. Is there anything I can do to help? Clean up breakfast, perhaps? Kieran looked uncomfortable. If you wish. Then the two men were gone, leaving her alone in the small house. Zelda set to work cleaning up the breakfast dishes, then tidying the main room. It was strange being in someone else's home, touching their things. She tried not to be intrusive, but she could not help noticing small details. The house was Spartan, with few personal touches. No photographs, no letters, no decorations beyond what was strictly functional. The books on a small shelf by the fire were worn but well cared for. She tilted her head to read the titles. Agricultural texts, a book on horse breeding, a few novels by Dickens and Twain. She was drawn to the window, looking out at the transformed landscape. Everything was white and pristine, untouched except for the tracks the men had made going to the barn. It was beautiful in a stark way, this wild country, different from Missouri where she had grown up. There the land was green and rolling, tamed by decades of farming. Here everything was raw and harsh and unforgiving. The men returned an hour later, stamping snow from their boots on the porch. They brought cold air and the smell of animals with them. All the livestock came through fine, Kieran reported. The barn kept them warm enough. That is good news, Zelda said. Would anyone like more coffee? That would be welcome, Sam said, settling into the rocking chair with a groan. Zelda made fresh coffee, pleased to have something useful to do. She served it to both men and they drank gratefully. I was thinking, Kieran said slowly, as if the words cost him something. We should try to retrieve your belongings from the coach, Miss Crawford, before any more snow falls. Is it safe? She asked. Safe enough. The storm has passed. It will just be cold work. Then I should help. No need. Sam and I can handle it. I insist. They are my belongings after all. Kieran looked like he wanted to argue but finally nodded. Dress as warmly as you can. Zelda layered on everything she had. 2 petticoats, her heaviest dress, her shawl, her coat, her gloves. When she emerged, both men looked at her with what might have been amusement. That will have to do, Kieran said. They trudged out to the barn, the snow coming up past Zelda's ankles. The cold was intense but manageable now that the wind had died down. The sun was even peeking through the clouds, making the snow glitter like diamonds. Her trunk was covered in snow but otherwise undamaged. Kieran and Sam lifted it down from the coach, grunting with the effort. Together they carried it to the house, Zelda following in their tracks. Once inside, they set the trunk in the bedroom and Zelda opened it eagerly, relieved to find her things dry and intact. Her clothes, her few books, the photograph of her parents, the small jewelry box that had been her mother's. Seeing these familiar objects made her eyes sting with tears. So much had been lost, but these things remained. Is everything all right? Kieran asked from the doorway. Yes, she said quickly, wiping her eyes. Everything is fine, thank you for getting my trunk. He nodded and turned away, giving her privacy. Zelda changed into dry clothes finally, luxuriating in the feel of clean, dry fabric. She brushed out her hair, which had been hopelessly tangled, and rebraided it. She looked at herself in the small mirror over the dresser and was surprised by what she saw. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her eyes bright. She looked more alive than she had in months. The day passed slowly. There was not much to do in the small house, and the tension of being stranded with strangers made time seem to stretch. Sam dozed most of the afternoon. Kieran occupied himself with small tasks, mending tacks, sharpening knives, anything to keep his hands busy. Zelda tried to read but found she could not concentrate. Her eyes kept drifting to Kieran, watching him work. He had good hands, she noticed, strong and capable. He worked with focus and precision, never wasting motion. "Did you build this house yourself?" she asked, breaking the silence. He looked up, seeming surprised that she had spoken. "Yes. It is well made, thank you. How long have you lived here?" "4 years. And before that," his jaw tightened, "other places." The message was clear, he did not want to talk about it. Zelda fell silent again, feeling foolish for pushing, but then, unexpectedly, Kieran spoke again. "I came from Montana, worked on a cattle ranch up there, saved my money and came south, bought this land. It is not much, but it is mine." "It is a good thing, owning land," Zelda said softly. "My father always said so. Your father has passed 3 months ago, pneumonia. It took him quickly. I am sorry." "Thank you." She paused, then asked, "And your family?" "Gone." The word was flat, final. "I am sorry," Zelda echoed his own words. Kieran shrugged. "It was a long time ago." But she could see it was not so long ago in his heart. Whatever had happened still hurt him, kept him isolated out here in the wilderness. That evening, Kieran made a better dinner than the simple meals they had eaten so far. He had venison in his cold cellar, and he made a stew with potatoes and carrots and onions. The smell filled the small house, making Zelda's mouth water. They ate together at the small table, and for the first time the silence felt companionable rather than awkward. Sam told stories from his years driving stagecoaches, tales of outlaws and storms and strange passengers. Even Kieran seemed to relax, a faint smile touching his lips at some of the funnier anecdotes. "What about you, Miss Crawford?" Sam asked. "What brings you all the way to Arizona territory? Besides your aunt, I mean." Zelda set down her fork, choosing her words carefully. "My father was all I had left in Missouri. After he died, there was nothing keeping me there. My aunt wrote and said I could live with her, help her with her boarding house. It seemed like a good opportunity for a fresh start." "Must have been hard, leaving everything behind," Sam said sympathetically. "It was. But sometimes a fresh start is necessary. Sometimes staying in a place just means living with ghosts." Kieran looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw understanding in his eyes. He knew about ghosts. He lived with them too. "I think you will like Arizona," he said quietly. "It is hard country, but there is freedom here, room to breathe. Room to become someone new if that is what you need." "Is that what you did?" she asked. "Became someone new," I tried. His gaze dropped back to his plate. "Not sure I succeeded." After dinner, Zelda insisted on washing the dishes while the men tended to the animals one last time before bed. She worked slowly, carefully, thinking about what Kieran had said. Freedom, room to breathe, room to become someone new. It sounded appealing. In Missouri, she had been Catherine Crawford's daughter, then she had been Albert Crawford's daughter. Who was she on her own? She did not know yet. When the men returned, Sam immediately settled into the rocking chair, his usual spot. Kieran stood by the fire, warming his hands. "Tomorrow I will check the road," he said. "See how passable it is. If the sun stays out, it should melt enough for the coach to get through in another day or so. I will go with you, Sam said. No need, you should rest. You are not a young man anymore, Sam chuckled. That is the truth. All right, I will stay here and keep Miss Crawford company. Kieran glanced at Zelda, that unreadable expression on his face again. That is fine. But when morning came and Kieran prepared to check the road, Zelda made a sudden decision. I am coming with you, she announced. Both men stared at her. Miss Crawford, it is a rough walk, Kieran said. Probably 3 or 4 miles out to the main road and back. I can manage. I need to get out of this house. I feel like I have been cooped up for a week instead of just 2 days. Kieran looked like he wanted to argue but finally shrugged. Dress warm. We leave in 10 minutes. Zelda bundled up in her layers again, adding an extra shawl and a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. When she emerged, Kieran handed her a pair of worn boots, much too large for her. Put these on over your shoes. Stuff the toes with rags. It will help keep your feet dry. She did as instructed, touched by his thoughtfulness. They set out across the snow-covered land. The day was clear and cold, the sun bright in a blue sky. The snow crunched under their feet, and their breath made white clouds in the air. It was hard going, fighting through the snow, but Zelda was determined not to complain. Kieran walked ahead of her, breaking trail. He was tall enough that the snow only came to his shins, while it reached halfway up Zelda's calves. But she kept up, matching his pace step for step. They walked in silence for a while. Around them, the desert landscape was transformed, all the harsh edges softened by snow. A jackrabbit bounded across their path, its ears black against the white. A hawk circled overhead, riding the cold currents. It is beautiful here, Zelda said, breaking the silence. Kieran looked back at her, then around at the landscape. I suppose it is. I forget sometimes. When you see something every day, you stop really seeing it. I cannot imagine that. How could you ever stop seeing something so magnificent? The magnificent becomes ordinary. The special becomes routine. That is just how people are. That is sad. Maybe. Or maybe it is just practical. You cannot stand around marveling at sunsets when there are animals to feed and fences to mend. Zelda thought about that. I suppose you are right. But I hope I never stop noticing when something is beautiful. Kieran did not respond, just kept walking. They reached the main road about an hour later. It was barely recognizable, just a depression in the snow slightly different from the surrounding terrain. Kieran walked along it, examining the depth of the snow, checking for ice underneath. It will be passable tomorrow, he said finally, assuming no more snow falls tonight. That is good news, Zelda said, though she was surprised to find that part of her felt disappointed, which was ridiculous. She should be eager to continue her journey, to reach her aunt and start her new life. Instead, she felt strangely reluctant to leave this place, this small house in the wilderness and the quiet man who lived there. We should head back, Kieran said. You must be cold. She was cold, her toes numb in the oversized boots and her nose stinging from the wind, but she shook her head. Not yet. Can we walk a bit more? I just want to see what is over that rise. Kieran looked uncertain. We should not go too far. Just a little way, please. He sighed but nodded, and they struck out away from the road, climbing a gentle slope. Zelda's legs burned with the effort of pushing through the snow, but she was determined. There was something about this place, this moment, that felt important, though she could not explain why. They reached the top of the rise and looked out over a small valley. A frozen stream ran through it, lined with cottonwood trees. The scene was perfectly still, perfectly quiet, like something from a painting. Oh, Zelda breathed. Oh, it is lovely. Kieran stood beside her, his hands in his pockets. I come up here sometimes, when I need to think. I can see why it is so peaceful. Yes. He was quiet for a moment, then added, Most people cannot stand silence. They need noise, conversation, activity. They think being alone means being lonely. And you do not. Sometimes being alone is the only way to hear yourself think, the only way to figure out who you really are. Zelda looked at him, at his profile against the bright sky. Is that what you have been doing? Figuring out who you really are, trying to. He turned to face her and their eyes met. What about you, Miss Crawford? Do you know who you are? I thought I did. But lately I am not so sure. I thought I was someone defined by other people. My parents, my town, my place in society. But now all of that is gone. I have no idea who I am without those anchors. Maybe that is not such a bad thing. Maybe not knowing means you can become anyone you want to be. Or maybe it means I will just drift without purpose or direction. You do not strike me as the drifting type. Zelda felt a small smile tug at her lips. You do not know me well enough to make that judgment. Maybe not. But I am a good judge of character. You are strong, Miss Crawford, stronger than you think. You will figure out who you are, and when you do, I think you will like what you find. His words touched something deep inside her, some place that had been cold and dark since her father died. She felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them away quickly. Thank you, she said softly. That means more than you know. They stood there a moment longer, the silence comfortable between them. Then Kieran cleared his throat and turned away. We should get back. Sam will worry. They walked back to the ranch, retracing their steps. Zelda felt something had changed between them, some barrier had come down. She found herself wanting to know more about him, to understand the sadness she saw in his eyes. Can I ask you something? She said as they walked. You can ask. I might not answer. Why did you really come here? To Arizona, I mean. What were you running from? Kieran was silent for so long she thought he would not answer. Then, finally, he spoke. My family ran a ranch in Montana. Small place, but it was home. My father, my mother, my younger sister. Her name was Katie. She was only 16. He paused and Zelda waited, sensing that pushing would make him stop. Raiders came one night. Outlaws, drifters, we never knew exactly who they were. They wanted food, supplies, money. My father tried to stand up to them. They shot him. Then they shot my mother when she screamed. Katie and I hid in the root cellar. We heard everything. Zelda's heart clenched. She wanted to reach out to him but sensed he would not welcome it, not yet. When they left, we came out. I tried to save them, but it was too late. They were both gone. After we buried them, I could not stay there. Every time I looked at that place, I saw them dying. Katie went to live with our aunt in Denver. I came here. I thought maybe if I was alone, if I built something new, I could forget. But you never really forget, do you? No, Zelda said quietly. You never forget. You just learn to carry it differently. Yes, that is exactly right. They reached the ranch in silence. Sam had dinner waiting and they ate quietly, each lost in their own thoughts. That night when Zelda lay in Kieran's bed, she thought about his story, about the pain he carried. She understood now why he lived the way he did, why he kept himself apart. He was protecting himself, building walls so he could never be hurt like that again. But walls also kept good things out. Joy, connection, love. She wondered if he knew that. She wondered if he cared. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Kieran declared the road passable, and Sam began preparing the stagecoach for departure. Zelda packed her things slowly, reluctant despite knowing it was time to go. When everything was ready and the horses hitched, she stood on the porch of the small house, looking at Kieran. He stood with his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable as always. Thank you, she said, for everything, for saving our lives, for giving us shelter, for your kindness. I will not forget it. Safe travels, Miss Crawford. I hope you find what you are looking for in Apache Junction. She wanted to say more, to tell him that meeting him had meant something to her, that in just a few days he had made her feel more seen and understood than anyone had in years. But the words would not come, and Sam was calling for her to board the coach. "Goodbye, Mr. Kane," she said instead. "Goodbye." She climbed into the coach, and with a lurch they were moving, the horses pulling them toward Apache Junction and her new life. Zelda looked back through the small rear window and watched Kieran standing in front of his house, a solitary figure getting smaller and smaller until he disappeared from view entirely. She thought that was the end of it, that she would never see him again. She told herself that was for the best. He was a closed-off man living alone in the wilderness, and she was starting a new life in town. Their paths had crossed briefly due to circumstance and nothing more. But over the following days and weeks, she found she could not stop thinking about him. His quiet voice, his gray eyes, the sadness he carried so stoically. The way he had looked at her in those brief moments when his guard was down. Apache Junction turned out to be a rough town, still new and growing. Her Aunt Margaret ran a respectable boarding house on the main street, and she welcomed Zelda with open arms. Margaret was a widow in her 50s, a practical woman who had made a good life for herself, despite the hardships she had faced. "You will like it here, once you get used to it," Margaret told Zelda over tea on her first evening. "It is not St. Louis, certainly, but there are good people here, hard-working people trying to build something." Zelda settled into life at the boarding house. She helped Margaret with cooking and cleaning, with managing the accounts and the guests. The work was hard but satisfying. She liked feeling useful, liked having a purpose. But still, in quiet moments, her thoughts drifted to the quiet ranch and the man who lived there. She wondered how he was doing, if he ever thought of her. She told herself not to be foolish. He had been kind to her, nothing more. She was reading far too much into a few days spent together by necessity. A month passed. The snow melted, and the desert began to bloom with the first hints of spring. The boarding house stayed busy with prospectors and cowboys and merchants passing through. Zelda learned the rhythms of the town, learned who was trustworthy and who to avoid, learned how to navigate this new world she found herself in. Then one evening in late March, there was a knock at the door. Margaret answered it, and Zelda heard a deep, familiar voice asking if they had a room available. Her heart jumped into her throat. She came around the corner, and there he was. Kieran Kane, hat in his hands, looking uncomfortable but determined. Their eyes met across the front hall, and everything else fell away. "Mr. Kane," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I needed supplies," he said. Then, after a pause, "and I wanted to see if you had arrived safely." Margaret looked between them with interest. "You two know each other. Mr. Kane gave us shelter during the blizzard," Zelda explained. "He saved our lives." "Then you are most welcome here," Margaret said warmly. "We have a room available on the second floor. Meals are included in the price." Kieran paid for a week's stay, and Margaret showed him upstairs. Zelda stood rooted to the spot, her mind racing. He had come. He had actually come to town, and he had come here to her aunt's boarding house. That could not be coincidence. At dinner that evening, Kieran sat at the long table with the other guests, but his eyes kept finding Zelda. She served the meal with Margaret, and every time she came near him, she felt her pulse quicken. After dinner, when the other guests had retired to their rooms or gone out for the evening, Kieran lingered in the front parlor. Zelda found an excuse to clean up in there, dusting surfaces that did not need dusting. "Miss Crawford," he said finally, "might I have a word?" "Of course." He stood, turning his hat in his hands nervously. "I apologize if my coming here is inappropriate. I know we are barely acquainted, but I could not stop thinking about you, about our conversations. I wanted to make sure you were well." Zelda set down her dust cloth, her heart pounding. "I am well." Very well. My aunt has been wonderful and I am learning to like it here. Good, that is good. Silence stretched between them. Zelda gathered her courage. I thought about you too, she admitted. More than I probably should have. Kieran's eyes met hers and she saw hope there mixed with fear. Did you? Yes. I kept wondering how you were, if you were lonely out there by yourself, if you ever thought about those few days. Every day, he said quietly. I thought about you every day. I tried not to. I told myself you were just a stranger passing through, that it was foolish to dwell on it, but I could not help it. There was something about you, something that stayed with me. I felt it too, Zelda said. I feel it too. They stood looking at each other and Zelda could hardly breathe. This could not be happening. She barely knew this man, and yet she felt more connected to him than she had to people she had known her whole life. I should not have come, Kieran said, but he made no move to leave. You deserve better than a lonely rancher with ghosts in his past. And you deserve better than a life of isolation, Zelda countered. We both carry pain, Mr. Kane, but that does not mean we do not deserve happiness. He stepped closer to her, close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. You make me want to believe that. You make me want to try. Then try, she whispered. We can try together. He raised his hand slowly, as if he was afraid she might disappear, and gently touched her cheek. His palm was rough and warm, and Zelda leaned into it without thinking. Zelda, he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. Kieran. He bent his head and kissed her softly, tentatively, as if he was unsure of his welcome. Zelda rose on her toes and kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart beating fast, matching her own. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Kieran rested his forehead against hers. I have been alone for a long time, he said quietly. I do not know if I remember how to be with someone. We will figure it out together, Zelda said. If you are willing to try. I am willing. God help me, I am willing. Over the following days, Kieran stayed in town and he and Zelda spent every moment they could together. He helped around the boarding house, fixing things that needed fixing, doing the heavy work that was difficult for Margaret. In the evenings, after the dinner dishes were cleaned, he and Zelda would sit in the parlor and talk. They talked about everything. Their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Kieran told her more about his family, about the guilt he carried for not being able to save them. Zelda told him about the loneliness of watching her father fade away, about feeling like she had no purpose or place in the world. You have a place, Kieran told her. You have a place with me if you want it. Is that a proposal, Mr. Kane? She teased gently. Not yet. But it will be when the time is right. I want to do this properly. Court you the right way, give you time to be sure. I am sure now, maybe, but I want you to have time anyway. You have been through a lot in the past few months. I do not want you to make a decision you might regret. Zelda understood, even though part of her wanted to rush forward to seize this happiness before it could slip away. But Kieran was right. They had time. They could do this the right way. Kieran extended his stay at the boarding house week after week. He found work in town, helping at the livery stable and doing odd jobs for various businesses. He was a hard worker and honest, and people quickly learned they could trust him. Word got around that he was courting Zelda Crawford, and most people in town approved. A few of the older women clucked about it being too fast, but Margaret defended them both. They are both adults who have known sorrow, she said firmly. If they have found happiness together, who are we to judge? Spring turned to summer, and the desert bloomed. Kieran and Zelda took walks in the cool of the evening, exploring the area around town. He showed her the hidden places he had found, the secret springs and the ancient petroglyphs carved into rocks. She showed him how to see beauty in everyday things, how to find joy in small moments. They fell deeper in love with each passing day. Kieran began to smile more, the shadows in his eyes gradually lifting. Zelda felt herself becoming someone new, someone stronger and more confident than she had ever been in Missouri. In August, Kieran took her back to his ranch. It was a long day's ride from town, but Zelda wanted to see it, to understand this place that was so important to him. When they arrived, dusty and tired, she looked around with fresh eyes. "It is beautiful," she said, and she meant it. The house was small but well built, the land was harsh but had a stark beauty to it. She could see why he loved it here. "It could be our home," Kieran said carefully. "If you would have it, if you would have me." Zelda turned to him. "Is this your proposal?" "It is." He took her hands in his. "I know I am not much. I am just a rancher with a small piece of land and more past than future. But I love you, Zelda. I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Zelda's cheeks. "Yes. Yes, of course I will marry you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Zelda felt like her heart might burst with happiness. They were married in September, in the small church in Apache Junction. Margaret cried happy tears and insisted on hosting a reception at the boarding house. Half the town turned up to celebrate, bringing food and gifts and good wishes. Sam, the stagecoach driver, was there, grinning from ear to ear. "I knew it," he told them. "That day in the storm, I could see something between you two. I am glad I was right." After the wedding, they returned to the ranch. Their ranch now. Zelda threw herself into making the house into a home. She sewed curtains and cushions, planted a garden, filled the empty spaces with warmth and life. Kieran built on an addition, adding a larger bedroom and a proper kitchen. They worked side by side, building their life together. It was hard work, but they were happy. Kieran taught Zelda how to ride and how to help with the cattle. Zelda taught Kieran how to let someone in, how to trust and be vulnerable. Their first winter together was harsh, with another series of blizzards that trapped them inside for days at a time. But unlike the previous year, Kieran was not alone. He had Zelda, and she had him. They spent those snowed-in days reading by the fire, cooking together, making love in the big bed they now shared. "You ever regret it?" Kieran asked her one evening as they lay tangled together under quilts. "Giving up town life to live out here in the middle of nowhere?" "Never," Zelda said firmly. "This is where I belong, with you. This is home." He kissed her forehead, holding her close. "I love you. I love you too." In the spring, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. They were both overjoyed and terrified. Kieran worried constantly about her health, about the dangers of childbirth, about all the things that could go wrong. Zelda was calmer, trusting in the midwife from town and in her own body. In December, during the first snowfall of the year, Zelda went into labor. The midwife, a capable woman named Helen, arrived in time to help. Kieran paced outside, unable to stand being helpless while Zelda suffered. After hours that felt like years, he heard a baby's cry. Helen opened the door, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Kane. A healthy, strong boy. And your wife is doing just fine." Kieran rushed inside to find Zelda propped up in bed, sweaty and exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle, red-faced and squalling. His son. Their son. "He has your eyes," Zelda said softly, smiling up at him. Kieran sat on the edge of the bed, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. The infant gripped it instinctively, and Kieran felt something in his chest crack open. "What should we name him?" he asked. Zelda had thought about this. "I would like to name him Albert, after my father. And his middle name could be James, after yours." "Albert James Kane," Kieran said, testing it out. "It is perfect." They called him AJ for short, and he grew fast, a happy baby who rarely cried. Kieran was a devoted father. involved in every aspect of his son's care, despite the raised eyebrows from some of the more traditional folks in town. He changed diapers and walked the floor at night and sang lullabies in his rough voice. 2 years later, they had a daughter they named Catherine Margaret, after Kieran's lost sister and Zelda's aunt. Katie, as they called her, had her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes. She was a wild child from the start, fearless and curious. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch grew and prospered. They built a larger barn, acquired more cattle, even hired a hand to help with the work. Kieran's walls came down completely, and he became a man who smiled easily, who laughed with his children, who was known in town as friendly and fair. Zelda bloomed in the desert. She joined the ladies' auxiliary in town, helped at the church, became known for her kindness and her practical wisdom. She wrote letters to Kieran's sister Katie in Denver and eventually convinced her to visit. It was an emotional reunion, with many tears, but it healed something in Kieran to reconnect with his only remaining family. On their 5th anniversary, Kieran took Zelda back to the spot where they had stood during that walk after the blizzard, the small valley with the frozen stream. "Do you remember this place?" he asked. "Of course. You told me this is where you came to think. I came here the day after you left for Apache Junction. I stood right here and realized I was in love with you. I had only known you for 3 days, and yet I knew I could not let you just disappear from my life." Zelda took his hand. "I am glad you followed your heart. Me too." He pulled her close. "You saved me, you know. That storm brought you into my life and you brought me back to life. You made me visible to myself again." Zelda thought about that, about the title someone had once suggested for their story. When the blizzard made her invisible, the cowboy saw her clearly. "You saw me too," she said. "When I felt like I was disappearing, like I was becoming nothing, you saw who I really was. You saw all of me, even the broken parts. You were never broken, just wounded. There is a difference. So were you." "Yes, but we healed each other." They stood there together, looking out over the valley as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. In the distance, they could hear AJ and Katie playing in the yard of the ranch house, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "You ever think about that day?" Zelda asked. "The day of the blizzard, all the time. I think about how close I came to never meeting you. If Sam had not known about my ranch, if the storm had hit an hour earlier or later, if I had been away in town. So many things that could have gone differently. But they did not. We found each other, against all odds. Maybe it was not about odds," Zelda said thoughtfully. "Maybe it was fate. Maybe we were always meant to find each other, and the blizzard was just the universe's way of making sure we did." Kieran smiled. "I like that idea. I like thinking that you were always meant to be mine and I was always meant to be yours." "I do not think I was meant to be yours," Zelda corrected gently. "I think we were meant to belong to each other. There is a difference." "Yes," Kieran agreed, kissing her temple. "Yes, there is." As the years passed, their love only deepened. They weathered droughts and hard winters, sick animals and difficult harvests. They celebrated births and mourned deaths. They watched their children grow into strong, capable adults. AJ inherited his father's quiet strength and his mother's compassionate heart. He took over running the ranch, eventually marrying a schoolteacher from town and giving Kieran and Zelda 3 grandchildren. Katie inherited her father's stubbornness and her mother's intelligence. She shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to go to Denver to study nursing. Kieran and Zelda supported her decision, despite the whispers in town about young women getting above themselves. Katie excelled in her studies and eventually returned to open a clinic in Apache Junction, providing medical care to people who could not afford a doctor. When Kieran and Zelda were in their 60s, They took a trip back to that same valley where Kieran had proposed all those years ago. They rode there on horseback, moving slower than they once had but still capable. They stood in the same spot, older now, gray-haired and weathered, but still deeply in love. Zelda leaned against Kieran's side and he wrapped his arm around her waist. "I would do it all again," Zelda said quietly. "Every moment, every struggle, every joy. I would do it all again just to have this life with you." "Me too," Kieran said. "You know, I used to think I was happy being alone. I thought solitude was what I needed, that it was protecting me somehow, but I was not happy. I was just existing. You taught me the difference. You taught me how to live. And you taught me how to be strong, how to build a life from nothing, how to find home not in a place but in a person." They stayed there until the stars came out, holding each other, remembering the journey that had brought them together. The blizzard that had seemed like such a disaster had been the greatest gift either of them had ever received. When they returned to the ranch house, their son and daughter-in-law were there waiting, having ridden over to check on them. The grandchildren were playing in the yard, their voices bright and happy in the gathering darkness. Katie had come home for the weekend as well, bringing news of her latest patients and the expansion plans for her clinic. The house was full of noise and life and love. That night, lying in bed beside Kieran, Zelda reflected on how far they had come. From two lonely, wounded people thrown together by chance to this. A family, a legacy, a love that had endured and grown stronger with time. "Are you happy?" Kieran asked her in the darkness. "More than I ever dreamed possible," Zelda answered honestly. "You, completely, utterly, forever." He pulled her closer. "You are all I see, Zelda. From that first day to this one, you are all I see," she smiled, remembering. During the worst of the blizzard, when the snow had made everything invisible, when she had felt like she was disappearing into the white chaos, Kieran had found her. He had seen her clearly when no one else could, and he had said those words that had become the foundation of their love. "You are all I see." Not a declaration of blindness, but of focus, of choice, of seeing what mattered most and holding onto it with both hands. They drifted off to sleep together as they had every night for decades, secure in their love and their life together. The years continued to pass. They celebrated their golden anniversary with a large party that brought together everyone they had touched over the years. The church was packed, the celebration lasting well into the night. People told stories about Kieran and Zelda, about their generosity and kindness, about the example their love had set for the whole community. Through it all, Kieran and Zelda sat side by side, holding hands, their love as visible and strong as it had been 50 years before. When Kieran was 73, he got sick. It started as a cough that would not go away, then developed into pneumonia. For weeks he fought it, with Zelda and Katie both nursing him tirelessly. But the sickness was too strong, and one cold February morning, 55 years after the blizzard that had brought them together, Kieran passed away peacefully in his sleep, with Zelda holding his hand. The funeral was huge, with people coming from all over Arizona territory to pay their respects. Kieran Kane had been a good man, a kind man, and he was deeply mourned. But as hard as it was, Zelda found she could bear it. She had been blessed with 55 years of love, of partnership, of true companionship. So many people never found that, never even came close. She had been given a gift, and she was grateful for every moment of it. She continued living at the ranch, with AJ and his family close by. She spent her days working in her garden, playing with her great-grandchildren, and writing down the story of her life with Kieran. She wanted future generations to know about the blizzard, about the lonely rancher who had opened his door to strangers, about the love that had grown from those desperate, frozen days. On February 14th, 5 years after Kieran's death, Zelda passed away in her sleep. She was 78 years old. Her family found her in the morning, looking peaceful, a small smile on her face. On the bedside table was the last page of her memoir, and on it she had written, "When the blizzard made me invisible, lost in a white world where I could not find myself, Kieran saw me clearly. He looked past the cold and the fear and the uncertainty and saw who I truly was. And in seeing me, he helped me see myself. This is what love does. It makes us visible to each other and to ourselves. It gives us eyes to see what truly matters. Kieran used to tell me, 'You are all I see,' and I would tell him the same. Because when you find the right person, everything else fades away. All the noise and distraction and worry falls silent, and all that remains is this: two people seeing each other clearly, choosing each other every day. That is what we did. We chose each other in a blizzard, and we kept choosing each other every day after. And I would do it all again, 1,000 times over, just for the chance to be seen so clearly and to see him the same way. My Kieran, my home, my heart." They buried her next to Kieran in the small cemetery outside Apache Junction. The whole town turned out for the funeral. People told stories about Zelda and Kieran, about their famous love story, about how they had built something beautiful out of tragedy and loneliness. AJ and Katie stood together by their parents' graves, their own families gathered around them. The February day was cold but clear, with no hint of the storms that had been predicted. "They had a good life," AJ said quietly. "The best," Katie agreed. "They showed us all what love should look like." And they had. Two wounded souls who found each other in a blizzard and built a love that lasted a lifetime, that rippled out to touch everyone around them, that became legend in a small Arizona town. Years later, people still told the story. The story of the cowboy and the woman stranded in a snowstorm. The story of how he opened his door and his heart. The story of how love can bloom in the harshest conditions, how it can heal old wounds and create new hope. The ranch stayed in the family, passing down through generations. The house was expanded and modernized, but the original structure that Kieran built remained, a testament to his skill and craftsmanship. Visitors could still see the small room where Zelda had slept that first night, the fireplace where they had warmed themselves, the window that looked out over the valley where Kieran had proposed. And every February, on the anniversary of the blizzard, the family would gather at the ranch. They would toast Kieran and Zelda, remembering the love that had started it all. The great-great-grandchildren who had never known them listened wide-eyed to the stories. The tale of the blizzard, the proposal, the life they built together. "Tell us again," the children would beg. "Tell us about the storm." And the stories would flow, keeping alive the memory of two people who had been lost and then found, who had been invisible and then seen, who had been alone and then together. The story of Kieran and Zelda became woven into the fabric of Apache Junction itself, a reminder of what love could be when two people were brave enough to risk their hearts. Their graves became a place where young couples would go, asking for their blessing, hoping some of that legendary love might rub off on them. On the gravestone, beneath their names and dates, was an inscription chosen by their children. When the world made them invisible, they saw each other clearly. And below that, the words Kieran had spoken to Zelda so many times over their years together: "You are all I see." It was a simple phrase, but it held within it the entire story of their love. In a world of distraction and noise, they had focused on each other. In a time of loneliness and loss, they had chosen connection. In the face of fear and uncertainty, they had chosen hope. They had been two people caught in a blizzard, but they had found their way to warmth and safety and love. and that love had sustained them through every storm that followed, every challenge, every joy, every sorrow. It was a love story worthy of legend, and in Apache Junction, Arizona, it became exactly that. A story told and retold, a touchstone for what love could be, a reminder that sometimes the worst storms bring the greatest gifts. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Kieran and Zelda were together still, seeing each other clearly as they always had, their love eternal as the mountains, constant as the desert sky, deep as the canyon where a frozen stream once ran through cottonwood trees. Their story was complete, a circle closed, a love fulfilled. From the blizzard to the grave, they had walked together, hand in hand, seeing each other clearly when the world could not, choosing each other every single day. And that, in the end, is all any love story needs to be.